Imagine a story where a young British Muslim man, desperate to know the father he never met, joins ISIS in Syria. His twin sister, consumed by grief and love, refuses to abandon him. And caught in the middle is a politician, the UK Home Secretary, whose own ambition and his son's heart make him the most unexpected pivot of the entire tragedy. This is Home Fire by Kamila Shamsie, published in 2017. It won the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2018 and was longlisted for the Man Booker Prize. It is one of the most urgent, devastating, and brilliantly constructed novels of the 21st century. Today, we are going to talk about who Kamila Shamsie is, how this book reworks one of the oldest plays in Western literature, what actually happens in it, and most importantly, why it matters so much right now. So Kamila Shamsie was born in Karachi, Pakistan in 1973 into one of Pakistan's most distinguished literary families. Her grandmother, Jahannara Habibullah, was a pioneering Urdu fiction writer. Her aunt, Muniza Shamsie, is one of Pakistan's foremost literary critics. Shamsie was educated in Karachi, then at Hamilton College in the United States, and completed her MFA at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, a city that is, perhaps not coincidentally, where the first section of Home Fire is set. She has lived in London for many years and holds both British and Pakistani citizenship. She was named one of Granta's best of young British novelists and is a fellow of the Royal Society of Literature. She is the author of 7 novels. Her earlier works, like Cartography, Burnt Shadows, A God in Every Stone, establish her as a writer obsessed with the long shadows cast by history, empire, and partition. She is a writer who asks, what does it mean to belong to a place? What does it mean to be loyal to a country, to a family, to yourself? And what happens when those loyalties violently collide? With Home Fire, she took all of these preoccupations and brought them crashing into the most explosive subject of the contemporary moment: radicalization, terrorism, British Muslim identity, and citizenship. Now, before we go into the plot, we need to talk about Sophocles. Because Home Fire is not just a contemporary novel, it is a retelling of one of the oldest and greatest tragedies ever written, Antigone, from around 441 BC. The novel's epigraph tells you this immediately. It opens with a line from Sophocles, translated by Seamus Heaney, and the line is, "The ones we love are enemies of the state." That is the entire moral universe of this novel in 9 words. In Sophocles' Antigone, the city of Thebes has just survived a civil war. 2 brothers, Eteocles and Polynices, they have killed each other in battle. The new king Creon decrees that Eteocles, who fought for Thebes, will receive a proper burial and honor. But Polynices, who fought against Thebes, is to be left unburied, to rot in the open air, denied the funeral rites that in ancient Greek belief allowed a soul to pass into the afterlife. Antigone, their sister, refuses to accept this. She buries a brother in defiance of the state. Creon condemns her to death. She is walled up alive. Creon's own son, Haemon, who loved Antigone, kills himself. Creon's wife kills herself. Creon is left alone, stripped of everything. The play is about the conflict between divine and moral law and the law of the state. It is about whether love and loyalty to family can override political authority. And it has never stopped being relevant because these conflicts have never stopped happening. Shamsie maps the Antigone characters onto a British Muslim family with extraordinary precision. Antigone becomes Anika Pasha, the younger twin sister who will not abandon her dead brother. Polynices, the brother denied burial by the state, becomes Parvez Pasha, who has died in Syria after joining ISIS and whose body the British government refuses to repatriate. Creon, the inflexible king who puts the law of the state above all human feeling, becomes Karamat Lone, the British Home Secretary, himself a Muslim man of Pakistani heritage, who has staked his entire political identity on being more British than anyone else. Haman, Creon's son who loves Antigone, becomes Yaman Lone, Karamat's son who falls in love with Anika. And Ismene, Antigone's cautious, more pragmatic older sister, becomes Isma Pasha, who loves her brother but has more complicated feelings about his choices. What is dazzling about the adaptation is how perfectly it works. The ancient moral dilemma drops straight into the present without any distortion. In fact, reading Shamsie makes you realize that Antigone was always about this, about who gets to be mourned, who gets to have a proper death, and who decides. Now the novel is told in 5 sections, each from a different character's point of view. Let's walk through it. The novel opens with Isma Pasha, the eldest of 3 siblings, at Heathrow Airport. She's trying to board a flight to Massachusetts, where she has been accepted into a PhD program in sociology. She is stopped by security, not for the first time, and interrogated for hours about her views on Shias, homosexuals, the Queen, democracy, suicide bombers. She is British. She has lived in London all her life. But her father, Adil Pasha, was a jihadi who died in US custody, probably at Bagram Air Base, and that shadow never leaves the family. Isma is raising her younger twin siblings, Anika and Parvez, because their mother and grandmother are both dead. She has sacrificed her own education and ambitions for years to do this. Now at last the twins are gone and she can go back to her own life. In Massachusetts, Isma runs into Yaman Lone, the son of Karamat Lone, the British Home Secretary. She recognizes him instantly because Karamat Lone publicly said cruel things about her father years ago. She doesn't reveal this to Yaman. They become tentative friends, a friendship shadowed by the history of their fathers. Isma also carries a terrible secret. She told the police about her brother Parvez that he had gone to join ISIS. She did it because she believed it was right, but she knows Anika will see it as an unforgivable betrayal. The second section follows Yaman Lone. He has returned to London after his stay in Amherst. He is a young man of considerable charm but comfortable aimlessness, a management consultant who has quit his job and is taking some time. His father is Karamat Lone, a Pakistani heritage British politician who has built his career on being relentlessly, even aggressively, integrationist. Karamat is the kind of Muslim who has changed his son's name from Ayman, Ayman, to Yaman, Eamonn, the Irish spelling, to signal belonging. Yaman meets Anika through Isma and they fall into a passionate, consuming love affair. But Anika is keeping her reasons for pursuing him secret. She's not with Yaman merely because she loves him, though she does love him. She is with him because she needs access to his father. Her brother Parvez is trapped in Syria, desperate to come home, and she needs Karamat Lone to use his power to bring him back. Yaman doesn't understand any of this yet. Then comes Parvez's section. This is the novel's moral and emotional center. We go back in time to understand how Parvez Pasha, a gentle, music-obsessed boy from North London, came to be in Raqqa. Parvez grew up without a father. His father, Adil Pasha, was a jihadi. The family never spoke of him. The shadow of him, the shame, the absence, the mystery, haunted Parvez his entire life. Then a man called Farooq finds him. Farooq claims to have fought alongside Adil Pasha. He tells Parvez stories about his father, not the monster of newspaper headlines, but a warrior, a man of courage, a man whose love for his son was so great he wept when he had to leave him. These are lies, or at best half-truths. But Parvez is starving for them. Over months, Farooq slowly, methodically grooms Parvez, telling him his sisters keep him infantilized, feeding him a narrative of Muslim humiliation and Western hypocrisy, until the boy who sat on his garden shed, recording train sounds and dreaming of a career in sound engineering, boards a plane to Istanbul and then enters Raqqa. What Parvez finds in Syria is not the promised land. It is a joyless, brutal, totalitarian state. He witnesses an execution. He is forced to work recording the sounds of beheadings and crucifixions for ISIS propaganda. He becomes, in his own words, an animal. And then he starts to try to find a way home. And by the time we reach Anika's section, Parvez has been killed, shot by ISIS as he tried to flee. His body is in Pakistan at the High Commission in Islamabad. Anika has travelled there. She refuses to leave without her brother's body. She sits beside the coffin day after day, refusing to accept the British government's position, which is that Parvez was a terrorist, a traitor, and his body will not be repatriated. Her grief is total. The novel's prose breaks open in this section into something almost unbearable. Look at this quote. Grief was a shapeshifter and invisible too. Grief could be captured as reflection in a twin's eye. Grief heard its death sentence the morning you both woke up and one was singing and the other caught the song. End quote. Anika's vigil becomes an international news story, but Karamat alone will not move. And the final section is Karamat's, and it builds to the ending that mirrors Antigone's catastrophe. Karamat Lone is a fascinating, complex character, not simply a villain. He's a man who has genuinely paid a price to be where he is, who has navigated racism and hostility to reach the highest levels of British government. He believes genuinely that the only way for Muslims to thrive in Britain is to be unimpeachably, demonstrably loyal to the state. He has no patience for those who he thinks give ammunition to the enemy. But he's also, in the end, Creon. He's a man who has made the state his god and who will sacrifice everything on its altar, including his own son. The ending is Sophoclean in its violence and its beauty. Yaman, now knowing everything, goes to Islamabad to be with Anika. He walks into the park where she is holding her vigil, and two ISIS operatives who have been waiting strap a suicide belt to him, a final act of ISIS's cruelty and a trap that has been set for Karamat. They want the Home Secretary to watch his son die on television. The final image, two figures holding each other under an ancient tree, the cameras rolling, the world watching, is the novel's Antigone moment. Anika choosing love over survival, Yaman choosing to stop fighting the belt, to drop his hands, to accept the end. Look at this quote. She rests her cheek against his. He drops his head to kiss her shoulder. For a moment, they are two lovers in a park, under an ancient tree, sun-dappled, beautiful, and at peace. End quote. Let's talk about the major themes. The first major theme is belonging and British Muslim identity. This novel talks about a lot of things, and the first and foremost thing it talks about is belonging and British Muslim identity. From the very first page, Shamsie drops us into the reality of what it means to move through the world as a British Muslim after 9/11 and 7/7. Isma is interrogated for hours at Heathrow because of who her father was. Look at this quote from the novel. He wanted to know her thoughts on Shias, homosexuals, the Queen, democracy, the Great British Bake Off, the invasion of Iraq, Israel, suicide bombers, dating websites. The Great British Bake Off alongside suicide bombers? The detail is exquisitely observed. The interrogator needs to know if Isma is sufficiently British, sufficiently harmless. Isma has rehearsed her answers with Anika. She knows what performance is required. And when the interrogator asks, "Do you consider yourself British?" Isma answers, "I am British." But the interrogator keeps pushing, "Do you consider yourself British?" As if Britishness is a feeling you have to produce on demand. As if legal citizenship is never quite enough. This is the novel's first great theme, the condition of living in a country that asks you constantly to prove your belonging. Then there is seduction of radicalization. The Parvez section is the most ambitious and important part of the book because Shamsie refuses to make radicalization simple. Farooq doesn't recruit Parvez with theology. He recruits him with fatherhood. Look at this quote. Not a footloose boy or feckless husband, but a man of courage who fought injustice, saw beyond the lie of national boundaries, kept his comrades' spirits up through times of darkness. This is what Farooq offers Parvez, a father to be proud of. A story of himself that is larger than a fatherless boy on a North London estate. And Shamsie is careful to show us all the conditions that made the soil fertile for that seed. The stop and searches, the weight of his father's name, the sense of being infantilized by his sisters, the feeling of doors closed. But she does not excuse it. One of the novel's most disturbing and honest passages is when Parvez, in the first moments of radicalization, feels something like pleasure. Look at this quote. So this was how it felt to have a nation that wielded its sword on your behalf and told you acquiescence wasn't the only option. Dear God, the vain flooding pleasure of it. Shamsie is brave enough to show the appeal, the genuine human appeal of belonging to something that fights back, even as she shows us exactly where it leads. And the next theme is the cost of assimilation. Karamat Lone embodies the novel's most agonizing irony. He is a Muslim man who has fought his way to the highest levels of British power by being more British than the British. He changed his son's name. He declared publicly that his country was right and his community was wrong. He made himself the state. And when Anika holds a vigil in Islamabad and the cameras of the world watch, his response is not compassion, it is contempt. Look at this quote. She's going to look for justice in Pakistan? That final word spoken with all the disgust of a child of migrants who understands how much his parents gave up, family, context, language, familiarity, because the nation to which they first belonged had proven itself inadequate. End quote. This moment costs him enormously, politically, internationally. But he cannot stop himself. He has identified so completely with the British state that a young British Muslim woman seeking justice abroad reads to him as a betrayal of everything he stands for. And yet the novel does not make him simply a monster. He is a man who fought for real things. He asks himself uncomfortable questions. In one of the novel's most uncomfortable passages, he considers his proposed new law, expanding the Home Secretary's power to strip British-born citizens of their citizenship, and genuinely believes it is right. He is Creon, a man doing what he believes is necessary for order, who cannot see what it costs until it costs him everything. And then the bodies of the dead. Antigone is fundamentally about who is allowed a proper death, a proper burial, and who decides. Home Fire asks this question in the most contemporary terms possible. A British Muslim man dies in Syria after joining ISIS. Does he deserve to be brought home? Anika's answer is absolute. He was a brother. His politics, his crimes, his tragedy, none of it erases the fact that he was a human being who deserves to go home to his family. Karamat's answer is equally absolute. He was a traitor. The state decides. The novel refuses to resolve this. It holds both positions in tension and shows you their human cost. Anika's grief is real. Karamat's logic is internally consistent. And the reader is left to sit with the discomfort of a world in which both things are true. And then the next theme is love, both his salvation and weapon. The love story between Anika and Yamin is written with extraordinary tenderness and complication. It begins in manipulation. Anika pursues Yamin partly because she needs his father. But it becomes real, undeniably and devastatingly real. One of the novel's most beautiful and heartbreaking passages is Yamin in the early flush of love, realizing how much has shifted. And I'm quoting from the novel. The weeks went by. Life adjusted around the rules she set. He fired his cleaning lady, who also worked for his parents. In the time he had at home without her, he started learning Urdu. End quote. He learns Urdu for her. He reorganizes his life around her schedule. He is entirely and helplessly in love. And she is in love with him too. But she is also a woman trying to save her brother. And these two things exist in her simultaneously. When Yamin discovers the full truth, the extent of her plan, the way she used him, he is devastated. And yet he still goes to Islamabad. He goes to her anyway, because the love is real, even if nothing else was simple. The novel's final tragedy is not just political. It is that love in this world can be weaponized. ISIS uses Yaman's love for Anika to set a trap. The belt they lock around him is, in a terrible sense, an instrument forged from the very love that brought him to that park. So why should you read this book? Let me give you 5 reasons. First, it is a masterclass in structure. The 5-section, 5-voice structure is not a gimmick. Each character holds a piece of the truth the others cannot see. Shamsie parcels information with extraordinary precision. You feel the weight of each revelation because she has earned it. By the time you reach the ending, you have seen the same world through 5 different pairs of eyes, and the tragedy is visible from every angle. Second, it does what fiction does best. Fiction asks you to inhabit someone else's experience. In Parvez's section, Shamsie asks you to understand, not excuse but understand, how a young man ends up in Raqqa. This is not comfortable, it shouldn't be, but it is essential. The novel takes seriously what too many politicians and pundits refuse to. That radicalization has causes. That the people it claims are not monsters. They are human beings who were failed and manipulated. Understanding this is not weakness. It is the only way to prevent it. Third, it is about the stories we tell about ourselves. Every character in this novel is shaped by a story. Parvez by the story of his father. Karamat by the story of what it means to be a good British Muslim. Isma by the story of duty and sacrifice. Anika by the story of twinness, of being incomplete without her brother. One of the novel's quiet arguments is that the stories we are told about who we are and who we should be can save us or destroy us. And fourth, it is politically necessary. We live in a world where the debates this novel dramatizes about citizenship, belonging, the rights of Muslims in Western countries, the bodies of people who died in conflicts. They are live and ongoing. The UK did strip British-born citizens of their citizenship. People did die in Syria whose families begged for their return. Courts in multiple countries debated whether dead ISIS fighters' bodies could come home. Home Fire is not a novel about the past. It is about the present, rendered in the timeless language of Greek tragedy. And fifth, it is beautiful. Don't let any of that weight put you off. The prose is luminous. The love story is genuinely moving. The book is paced like a thriller. You will not be able to put it down. And when you finish it, at 2 a.m, probably with your heart in pieces, you will immediately want to call someone to talk about it. So, these were the 5 reasons of why you should read it. Please do pick it up. So, Home Fire asks the oldest questions. What do we owe the dead? What do we owe the living? And what does a state owe its citizens, all of them, not just the ones who are easy to love? Sophocles asked that question in 441 BC. Kamila Shamsie asked it again in 2017. The fact that the same question can be transposed almost without alteration from ancient Thebes to modern London tells you something important about where we are. This is a novel about grief and love and identity and the terrible, irresolvable tension between belonging to a family and belonging to a state. Read it. It will haunt you. That's it for today. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.